Let's turn to our business editor, Kate Moody.
Hey, Francois.
We thought it had all been settled last December. It clearly is not, and that's got the business community worried.
Absolutely. The questions just keep on coming when it comes to Brexit, Francois. Now, in Ireland, there is currently an open border, meaning that there are no customs checks or tariffs on trade between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, as indeed is the case throughout the rest of the European Union. The draft put forward by Michel Barnier suggests that that would essentially remain the case after Brexit, that Northern Ireland would remain in the EU customs union, while the British mainland would be surrounded by a sort of virtual border outside of the trade bloc. Theresa May has firmly rejected that proposal as undermining the UK's integrity, but the EU's top negotiator insisted that it would be a viable alternative to a hard border dividing the Irish Isle. Take a listen.
Two issues are key to avoid border checks. First, full alignment with the Union law on goods, veterinary and plant health rules. Second, our Northern Ireland has to be covered by the Union Customs Code. Our approach is focused on those areas where it is needed to avoid border checks. Daily life around the border should continue as today.
Now, for some perspective on this, we can cross to Dublin and speak to John McGrane, Director General of the British-Irish Chamber of Commerce. Thanks so much for speaking to us on France 24. What's your reaction to the EU's outline for what the Irish border could look like post-Brexit?
Good afternoon from Dublin. And the British-Irish Chamber of Commerce represents businesses employing over 2 million people located throughout the UK and Ireland. And our perspective has always been that it would have been better if the UK remained, but we respect the democratic vote that has happened. And we're now in the business of trying to help people to craft a solution that does the least damage to trade and movement and jobs. Today's paper, a very long and complex paper from the EU negotiation team, sets out simply the legalisation text, the extended legalisation text of what's already been set out in the 15th of December joint statement, which the UK signed up to and specified that if all else fails, the UK will behave in relation to Ireland as if the UK, and particularly Northern Ireland, was in the single market and the customs union. So in many ways, it's no surprise to see what's been said, but it certainly draws stark attention to the fact that the UK has not come up with any other ideas, and so this backstop position remains the only negotiated piece right now.
Concretely, what's at stake for the businesses that you represent? What could change here?
Well, the issues for business, number one, are about the lack of clarity at all in terms of what the UK wants to do in its future relationship with the EU, bearing in mind that the UK will leave the EU on April Fool's Day next year. So the time is running out on this in terms of what the UK wants to do. What business wants to see is the smoothest possible environment to continue trade, the extensive trade between these two islands and from these two islands. That trade is over 70 billion euros a year in both directions and over 400,000 directly related jobs. So it's not a small matter, and the EU 26, our friends in the other EU nations, including France, have supported Ireland's position to say, given this very particular nature of the border on the island of Ireland, the territorial border, we must not have any form of hard border that gets in the way of the trucks and the people and the trade and the services that get carried out across that border every day of every week. So business wants a solution that is without border, and the UK, absent any other discussions, is faced with this solution today from Mr Barnier, and we expect to hear the UK's response from as early as Friday in that regard.
Now, the EU has suggested a 21-month transition period. Is that long enough for businesses both in the Republic of Ireland and in the UK to get used to the new normal?
No, it's not. The transition period depends on transition to what. And until we know exactly what the new regime and the new set of relationships and the new operational arrangements for trade and jobs between these islands and the rest of the EU, until we know what that looks like, it's impossible to say how much work is necessary to change business systems, etc., to be prepared in time. So our position on behalf of the members of the British-Irish Chamber of Commerce, as set out in our recent publication, Big big principles for a strong Brexit partnership is a transition period that takes, quote unquote, as long as it takes. And it will be easier to have that conversation about the length of the transition period when we know to what is the solution that Mrs May proposes.
All right, John McGrane, thank you so much for joining us from London. From Dublin. Just time for a check on the day's trading action now. We had a lower close for the European markets as the prospect of more interest rate rises in the United States weighed on trade there. The CAC 40 and Frankfurt DAX each down just under half a percentage point. The London FTSE 100 a bit more there. After steep losses on Tuesday, Wall Street's having a bit more of a muted session. Investors very anxious to turn the page on what has been an extremely volatile month for global stocks. Francois.
All right, we'll get the closing word on Wall Street later. Many thanks for that, Kate Moody.